I don't know. Not the Chassidus want to record your class, but since we're going to record it, might as well get to do a little review there.
I agree. If you see someone like channeling Hashem, like a prophet or something.
Yeah.
You see him, like his eyes rolling back. He's like prophet. Like,
right.
You don't imagine him like being talking coherent, like perfect sentences.
Right.
Like you imagine this very, like
right.
It's very,
I know, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It is amazing. I guess that's the difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and everybody else. It says whenever all the other prophets, when they would become in the the grips of prophecy, they would fall down. They couldn't hold themselves together.
Right.
But Moshe could. He's Amdu. He stood and was able to go face to face with Hashem. I think in a certain sense that's what the Moshe Rabbeinu in general, all the generations sort of represents, is that he's able to stay, on his standing. Anyway, let's get inside the Maimer a little bit. So let's just try and bring out the point that we said from the last class.
Okay.
Page Nun Dalid. Just try and give a little summary, maybe.
Are you still on the same Maimer?
That's what I'm saying. And then to do the Sicha on the Maimer, I think it might be a little bit too much.
Is there a soccer this morning?
Every morning. Yeah. But okay, B'kitzer, what we were saying here is that the Chasidecha brings down this inyan of Panemius Atik. And why? Because their inyan is Chesed, Chasid. And what's the inyan of Chesed, we said? Is that they don't just fill the lack, which is called tzedakah. And then in addition to that, they're able to give chesed even to the rich, which means that even someone who's not only their lack is filled, but they're rich to the ultimate level of wealth, even they can receive from the chassid, because chesed is able to give to rich and poor alike. And we said therefore that filling the gap represents the lowest level of keser, because that was ultimately shaykh to the world to begin with, and the world gets it back. It's just tzedakah.
Right.
And then Atik, which is what's happening in the days of Shlomo, which is something completely beyond the world, that makes the world rich when it receives it, because it's not really shaykh to the world and it gets it anyway. And then giving to rich and poor alike is this level of Panemius Atik, that it's able to give even to the level of Shlomo, which is why Shlomo wasn't Mashiach. There's yet another level, which is basically where Chassidus holds in it. And that's called Panemius Atik, and that's specifically given by a Chassid, because his inyan is Chesed, which gives to rich and poor. So we said, what's the secret of the Chassid? Is because of his bittul. Ezu Chassid hamis Chassidim kono. So who is called a Chassid? Someone who does Chesed with his maker. So we said that means he does everything for complete selflessness. He's doing it purely for the sake of his maker. He does not have any personal interest, so to speak. Even the personal interest which could be found by other tzaddikim, just like enjoying the love of God, they don't even have that. They're just in a state of bittul. And that's why they're able to, this is what we were saying before, there's no them there. They're able to just be the Atzmus, basically. Mm-hmm. And for that reason, they're able to draw down all the way to the lowest places, and etc. Now, what we want to say is, what's the connection between these two things? One is the bittul that they have, and one is that they do chesed with their maker. In other words, that it's not. Well, I think maybe that's the same thing. Hold on. Bittul. Yeah.
Like today's class. There's no Seder.
Okay, hold on, I'm just trying to catch us up here. Okay, right. So then we said that there's another concept of the Chassid, right? So Chassid has the bittul. Therefore tapping into the Panemius Atik. He's able to bring something higher than a shiris, but higher than wealth. But then there's another thing that the Chassid has, which is, and this is the whole point. He's able to turn his kochos hatvim into kochos elokim. He's able to turn his natural powers into godly powers. He does that. And what does it mean? So we gave a brief description the other day. Natural powers means you love ice cream and you're afraid of mean people. And basically, if you would transform that as a regular tzaddik, not the chassid, it means that you would now love God and fear God, right? So that's not the process we're dealing with. That's already an amazing thing, and that's what a tzaddik does. He basically converts his midos into being directed towards God. But what we're saying here is that he has the ability to turn his midos into something which is God's feelings. Not that he's loving God, but that God's love is in him. So basically, that's a transformation of a natural thing into a divine thing. Wow. As opposed to just totally being swept away with godliness, that there's nothing else in your life but godliness, but there's still a you there. He becomes God's feelings in this world. Like it says, for example, about Avraham Avinu, that the midah, the sphere of Chesed of Atzilus was like jealous in his day because he didn't have anything to do. Because Avraham was embodying Chesed of Atzilus, that he was taking the job over, So this is the idea. Now, those are the two things. And the idea is that the chiddush that takes place in the world, the two things again is bittul and this ability to transform your midos. The two things that takes place in the world, the thing that takes place in the world as a result of him being able to transform his midos in this way, is that the whole world will be transformed. In other words, they do it, and it says, Afoch el ha'amim, I'm going to turn over the nations into a safa varuda, into a clear language. Everyone's going to start being good. And they're going to be doing it because he turned the natural world of himself into a divine being. That, so to speak, enables and empowers the whole rest of the world to transform themselves. Not that they have the courage to do that to themselves, but because he did it, it's now available for them to do.
So it hasn't happened yet?
Not in full. No.
The Rabbi, how did it happen?
Well, the whole process of Chabad Chassidus from generation 1 to 7 is, well, no, when you say it hasn't happened, we have to look at, it's a process.
I mean, if you look at the world...
No, but if you look at the world, you see a lot of different things, right? It's not one simple world out there. So if you look at, let's say, the stories of the Alter Rebbe, where he made the boat, stop, and then, the story, basically he had to do Kiddush Levana, and he stopped the boat so he could make Kiddush Levana, but he didn't want to make Kiddush Levana until the Russian boat driver stopped it on his own volition. So he stopped. So in other words, he was like modeling this behavior that the world would agree with Elokus on its own. Now, it only was able to do that because he was doing a type of work on himself. But that was a small little one-time shot, right? Now we see that kind of thing. We do see a lot of. In other words, we don't see the completion of it yet. But the fact is, and we were talking about it the other day, the fact is that we're up in arms right now, that the world won't listen to us, and we don't have a strong enough voice at the UN, itself is already kind of amazing, that we even think that we would. You know what I mean? There was a day in Jewish history not too long ago when that was like a comedy. That would have been a comedy routine, that we would have even been given a place to voice our opinion. So the fact of the matter is, it's still a big war that we're in the middle of, but as the Rebbe said, when the communism fell, it was the first time in human history that an entire philosophy and people changed their course without a world war. So in other words, there are plenty of things that you could point to the world and say that this is happening. It's not finished because we didn't finish. But the whole koach for this new way that the Rebbe said, go talk to the goyim about the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach. And he said, this has been a mitzvah sitting around in the Rambam for thousands of years. Why am I the first person to talk about it? He said, because it simply was not an option. If you're going to go to a goy, a Christian, priest, and start preaching him to the 7 b'nei Noach, he would put you in jail at best. You know what I mean? There was just no communication with the world to be able to enact our mitzvahs legabe them. So the fact that now there is a directive from the Nasi Adur to go speak to the world to get them on our side, that's a crazy thing that never existed before. So it's not, we didn't do it yet.
Was it because of the Holocaust?
It's, you could say that definitely was I think it was because of these people that we're talking about. It's because of the Rebbes. The fact that the world had to go through an unbelievable unrest, for sure, unrest, it was for sure, an aspect of what was going on in their Penimius Avoda. It was like going to Mitzrayim, the generation before we got Matan Torah. So that's basically what the Holocaust, it seems to me, was like going into Mitzrayim right before we got the 7th generation. It was like, in order to get the ultimate to receive the Torah of Chassidus, it has to come through the Yeridus into the ultimate gullus, for whatever reason, the pain. Just like you could ask the same question about the Torah. But we are Dur Ashvi, so just like Moshe Rabbeinu, he popped out, so to speak, and that great generation that was the redemption generation was followed by the ultimate destruction of the Jewish people. It was the same in the final count,
You know what was cool, I think the other day, was that like when someone is like happy, they're like bringing that into the world.
Right. That's what we're saying. So when he transformed himself, he like touched his yechida. The Rabbi in jail over there, he did something so wondrous with himself that he brought that into the world for everybody else. That's the whole point.
The Pasternak, the Rabbi makes a comment, because Yosef in jail,
Yeah.
he did the same thing out of kindness to those.
Yeah.
Next morning, this guy from Melancholy, they were depressed.
Right.
He tried to help. Rabbi gives a purport that, like scientific, one thing done like that can affect the other part of the world.
Right.
What he did affected so much for his.
Yep. So this is the idea. It affects the whole world. All right. So now, what are we saying here? That they were able to transform their midos, and in transforming their midos, they could transform the world. That's ultimately what's good. Their pu'ula is. Now, the question we had was that since they're in such a state of a bittul, why do they need to go busy transforming their midos? Because in reality, if they're not there to the extent that we're saying that there's a perfect channel for the atzmus, like we talked about in the previous classes, that should do the trick. In other words, why do they have to go and do like this extra pu'ula of turning their natural midos into godly midos? Like this avoda seems unnecessary. If they're able to pull down the atzmus, they've already made it clear that everything in the world is elokus. You see what I'm saying? In other words, so what Rabbi ultimately says is because we're talking in the opposite order. The way that they're able to pull down that atzmus is by transforming their natural midos into elokus. In other words, they do the avoda. They get their hands on the atzmus. It's not like they just like had a handy bittul in their pocket. They could just touch into this highest level because they were able to transform in themselves the level of the lowest part of the world of themselves, and there's their natural being of their body. They were somehow able to get their hands on it and turn it into elokus. So the only power that can do that is the atzmus. So that's what it means. They all of a sudden drew down the atzmus because of what they did. And once they did that to themselves, so the atzmus is in the world, so then it's available to all. That's basically what we said. Okay, so let's take it from page Nun Hey. I think the middle paragraph, I think, is what we're up to here. Oops, I don't know if we finished it, but we'll do it again. Oh yeah, we did do this. I apologize. Well, so one last point. I'll say it outside because I'm just trying to get going. The last point was, and this is one of the Rebbe's questions that he asked in the beginning of the Mimer. He said that seemingly, when we were talking about the Inyan of Chasidecha Yivrachucha taking us back, that the Chasidecha Yivrachucha had two different qualities. On one hand, they had the quality of prayer, because they could reach up to what we called Yoducha Hashem Kol Ma'asecha, right? The union of Hodah, which is at the Or Ein Sof level. That's what you have to recognize and not know. And nonetheless, they were able to get Yoducha Hashem Kol Ma'asecha to Chasidecha Yivarachucha, that the Chassid can draw that level of the Or Ein Sof all the way down into Ko, into Malchus, and with what Koach, because he's a Chassid, as we said. So in other words, the idea being is that he has both the milas of prayer and bracha, because he can command it to come down. Then we went a little bit further and we said that the Rebbe Rashab, when he's describing this, he brought an example of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Because Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was did this in a new, unique way that none of the other tzaddikim who had the power to command their bracha and change nature, like Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, who split the sea upon his command, which was basically also a modeling of this behavior, but it wasn't quite like the level of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who did it by doing what? Just saying a drasha on the Indian of rain. Or no, it wasn't even on the Indian of rain. He made it rain by saying a drasha that was completely not connected with rain. Let's just all get together and love each other, and it started to rain. So the idea is that what's greater here is that, okay, so what he's saying is that if you have to pray for something, that which is like level 1, there's going to be 3 levels here. If you have to pray for something, then for sure, even though you're reaching into the Or Ein Sof, you're not tapping into the level of the Atzmus. And what's the proof? That you are the one receiving the prayers. So you see, there's a certain separation inside of you, and therefore we jumped it up to a level of bracha. Because the idea of when you give it a bracha, when someone's able to draw that level down through bracha, it means that he not only does he not lack anything, but the level of godliness that he's trying to attain is within him to the point that he can wield it at will. Which means that the elukus at the level of the Or Ein Sof is one with him. He's not a recipient of it, he's already a bearer of it. So there's no separation there, therefore he can just command it to come out. The only problem is the thing he's commanding it to come out to is separated from him. The fact that it requires a bracha and like a tzivoy to get the elukus which is in him to the thing he's trying to bless means that even though he's all good, in his perception there's something outside of him which is not yet perfect. And this is the exact example of what the Rabbi was hinting at very, very small, and we didn't really click until right now about what was lacking by Shlomo HaMelech. Because we said Shlomo HaMelech, if you recall, he was part of Shalom Nafshi. He sat in Eretz Yisrael, the whole world came to him, and he brought the level of Atik. 1 second, I see it. He brought the level of Atik, which means he gave the world a certain level of Ashirus, which is beyond worldliness, and he sat in Eretz Yisrael. He didn't go into the land of the enemy. So we said that by him there was no world, and therefore seemingly he should have been able to bring this level of perfect oneness and transform everything, because he didn't go out to the land of the enemy, which means he didn't recognize the world. But what do we say is that in his mind he still recognized the world. In other words, he still felt like there was a world out there that he had to uplift, even though by him he was in a place of perfect uplift. You know, he stayed in Eretz Yisrael and he did not have any lackings when it came to his own self, but the fact that he, so to speak, needed to command the bracha, he would be like almost at the level of Pinchas ben Yair, meant that a world still existed in his mind that needed to be joined to his level. You get it? So come the Rashbi, and there was no world. In other words, he didn't have to go tell it the world to reign, because as far as he was concerned, there was nothing lacking. And the world was so one with him that as soon as he just basically wanted rain, it's like the world was him. The world was inside of him and listening to him. There was no disconnect. So just like, in other words, it was the natural tendency of the world to do the godly thing. He didn't have to command it up, like Pinchas ben Yair had to command the river to change its will to the will of God. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai did not have to change the will of the river. He just revealed that the ultimate will was that it should rain right now. There is no world of separation. As soon as he sort of just revealed himself and said the drasha, the world was automatically part of him and part of the will of God. So it's a perfect unity. That's why the Rebbe Rashab brought him as a unique example, because he ultimately is the only example that we have actually of this level of Chasidechi V'Rochucha. Okay, so that's what we said in the last class. You have a question?
Was Pinchas ben Yair on the level of, was he like Moshe Rabbeinu?
Pinchas ben Yair or Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, you're saying?
Pinchas ben Yair.
No, he was lower than the Rashbi. That's what we just said.
So the Rashbi was like Moshe Rabbeinu, but Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair was on a lower level.
We say Moshe Rabbeinu. What we're saying by the Rashbi is that no one in history basically was as great as the Rashbi. And let's say if Moshe had it, he did not reveal it. On the contrary, Moshe represented a certain level where he went out with the ark into the Midbar. You weren't here for these classes, but he was on a relatively low level as for what we're discussing right now. Because by him, whatever, the world was in such a place, he didn't have the access to the same level of light. It's strange to say it, but the Moshe Rabbeinu here represents the lowest tier of the tzaddikim that we're talking about. And again, if you want to say that Moshe had all those powers inside of him and it just wasn't time to reveal them, fine, true. But he didn't. If you're comparing the man Moshe to the man Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, it was basically an incomparable aliyah that took place. You can ask all the questions, but you can...
I'm sorry to be in Hebrew.
That's all right. I mean, when you say we have the koach to varech, I mean,
Is that the bracha we're talking about there? Or is it
no, it's a different bracha. That's someone else asked that
Something
question.
else.
Yeah, it's a different bracha. Because if you want to say that, then you have a problem distinguishing between bracha and tefillah. Because what is tefillah?
That's what I'm
But
asking.
18 brachas, right? 19 brachas. So no, the bracha is like, and he says clearly, it's in a lashon haTzivoy. You shall be rich. You should only have simcha and happiness.
So when you say Baruch Atah Hashem, what's your kavanah?
Okay, I mean that's already.
Really, you say it all the time. So.
No, I'm saying. I mean that's. I'm not sure if it's okay. Is that no gay? I don't think that's what the bracha that he's talking about here is. What I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Baruch Atah Hashem is basically you're not giving brachas to somebody necessarily. Maybe you're giving brachas to yourself.
We
I don't
talked
know.
about that the other day.
What's that?
We talked about that exact same point the other day.
Yeah, no. I mean, this is known pairs, which I'm sure you also know. Like, what does it mean, Baruch and Atah and Hashem, and so to speak. But I don't think that that's what he means when he says giving brachas.
I
Yeah.
wanted to see if it's
Yeah.
connected.
Okay. Well, listen. Let's, on a certain sense, let's just connect them for a second, if we can, because what is a bracha supposed to do? As we just said, it's supposed to make the world outside of you refined. What are these? All these tzaddikim, their one and only inyan was to birurim and zichuch of the world. So Moshe did it by going into the midbar. You know, Shlomo did it by staying at home, and Rashbi did it just by being the Rashbi. But we're also doing it when we make a bracha. I know there's Birchas HaNenin, for example. Isn't that what we're doing? We're trying to mamash refine things. And even when we pray, we're basically trying to refine ourselves, refine the world around us. So it is the same principle. Like the Avodas HaBirurim is connected to everything we do when we say a bracha. When we say a bracha on every time we do something holy, every time we do a mitzvah, every time we try to elevate and bring the world into an elevated space, it's sort of like a little Shabbos that we like throw around ourselves, the bracha, you know? So in that capacity, it fits right in. In other words, it's our attempt to do birurim. Now who's ever saying the bracha, whatever power he's generating it from at that point, like who he's connecting to and so forth, I guess that's what level of light can come through him. So I mean, theoretically, you know, we're in a generation where our brachas are extremely powerful because we're already in the Rebbe's generation. I don't know how much kavanah we have to have, or just Kabbalah soul, but anyway, let's go on a little bit. See if we can. Again, this chapter is like the finale of the Mimer. It's a little bit of a letdown because he doesn't answer all the questions, but whatever we can get out of it, we will. So he says, "Zeu pada b'shalom nafshi." That's what it says. My soul was redeemed in peace. B'shalom dafka. V'hainu chapediya hi betachlis hashalom v'ashlemus. That the redemption was perfect. It was the ultimate shlemus. Shalom here means shlemus, wholeness. There was nothing left of the enemy. That's what it means, a perfect redemption. Shalom nishar shum menagid klal. No opponent remains. Right? With Shlomo HaMelech, who hit the good times, we said there was still an opponent that remained. What was the opponent? Those who were completely disinterested in Elokus. He wasn't able to get to them. But here, the Pada b'Shalom, b'Shleimus, is there's going to be a level where there's no more Menagid. Lo k'Moshe being Nesiyas ha'aron de Moshe. So this is certainly not like the traveling of the ark in Moshe's days. Shenemar al zeh kum Hashem v'yafutzu oivecha v'yanusa misanecha mipanecha. Because over there it said, arise Hashem, and may your enemies be scattered, which means not destroyed. But just, so clearly he didn't do the whole job, because the enemies remained intact, they just were scattered. Shabir hay b'derech milchama, he was going on a way of in a way of war, not peace. V'lechein nishar metziyah shel oivim v'sonim. Therefore, it remained the existence of the enemy and the hated ones. Elashar ba'ofen diafutzu v'yanusu, just what they were scattered. V'gam lo k'moshe b'yemei Shlomo. Even Shlomo did not achieve the highest level of shleimus. Ta'al shabir hay b'derech meila, because even though he fixed the concept of fixing the world by way of war, he ceased going to war with the Menagid, because that, we already said, once you go into war with the Menagid, you've already lost. Because you can't undo your enemy while you're busy recognizing their existence. And when you're going to war with them, you're recognizing their existence. So this is such a deep, by the way, psychological thing. When it comes to it, this is how you deal with your problems in life. You know, we're living with this mimer for the past couple of weeks. I can't say it hasn't affected me. Everybody has enemies, so to speak. The enemy is your Yetzer Hara. You know, it's how you think about people the way you shouldn't think about people. It's how you think about your taivas the way you shouldn't think about them. You have these sonim and these oivim. And what he's saying is like a radical psychological thing. You know, don't go to war with them, because even though you might win, you're not going to win in that way. Because they're never going to go away by doing that. Because when you're going to war with them, You're strengthening their existence. So what do? So and this is the whole Indian of what's the difference of Chassidus and Musar basically. Musar is get away from the bad guys. That's like Musar means Sur Meira. So you're living in a realm where you're never going to get away from the bad guys because you're turning away from them all the time. And so you're hearing them. You're letting them be there. Chassidus is like, let's talk about God forever and all the time, And so you just go so deep into a level of good that ultimately the first thing that happens is that you sort of, you take your mind off it simply. And that might sound like an escapism, and there's a level of an escapism in that. That's like the level of Shlomo. Shlomo just kind of turned his eyes towards the world, and it did a lot of good, but he didn't bring Mashiach that way. But it's definitely a step in the right direction. Because you're escaping into Elokus, you're not escaping into negativity. But ultimately, you can go so deep that all those demons exist in your little depiction of Elokus. And all the things you're working on, all like the negative stereotypes or whatever, they're going to be in your model of Elokus when you get there, because at the end of the day, Hashem also made those. So it's like you can refine them by what they call sweetening the Gevurah, seeing every relationship and everything in this like place where it belongs, in the new light of Chassidus, like it says the Alter Rebbe says regarding the Nachash HaNachoshes that they put in the Midbar in order to kill the snakes, right? That you looked up they put it up so you looked at it so in the sky, so you had to like sort of see your Avinu Shabashamayim. When you looked at the snake, you would think of God. So he asked a simple question: why don't you just look in the sky? Why do they need to make like a snake that you put in the sky? So he brings the whole Indian of Nachamish Gamzu, that he was able to say Gamzu Latova, that he was able to see, so to speak, the snake in the sky. That where the source of the snake is, inside of Elokus, that all the negative things that happen in your life, they're only negative because they fall out of their divine source. But if you could see each thing, so to speak, in the concept. So this is what he's saying, that it all exists there as well. You don't have to escape from anything, and there you can fix it. Anyway.
I'm just curious how that works, say, like with the Arabs.
Right, I was going to say the same question.
Yeah, well, that's what the point is very simple. It's like you can make with positivity is how you make the Arabs go away. In other words, what did the Rabbi say? I just saw something the Rabbi said about this like 35 years ago. It was pretty much ahead of his times, I would say. He said that it used to be, I don't know, it's a famous thing that's going around, but it used to be that a sheik, you could just pay him off and quiet them down. And like for like a car or $1 million, like they would just do whatever you said. It was not a problem. And the kids listened to the parents. They had like a certain bittul. It was like kibbutz avim type of society. And he said nowadays it's the exact opposite. They've got a chip on their shoulder. You can't pay them $1 billion for them to give up their moral principle. It's become like a philosophical thing with them and their religion, and they're not bending. And the kids are worse. In other words, the younger the person, the more like it's instilled in them this rebellious like madness that they have.
Kind of crazy.
So the Rebbe's like, what do we do? This is 35 years ago. You can't really beat them. It's like they'll just keep coming back, Yeah. So he says that the antidote is that we got to get our Jewish kids crazy lit up for Torah. Like, where's that in a Yid? He said that by us it's the opposite. You used to see that even a secular Jew had like this pioneer spirit. Give me some land in the desert and I'll turn it into a garden, And he didn't have anything to do with Torah. He was just like, had the Yiddish neshama like a flame. And he said, today you can't even get a Jew to do anything, So he's saying like that's what we have to do. And it's exactly what he's saying here. It's like you don't have to deal with them. The thing is about us. If you could just like turn up the light of the Yid and make a huge bonfire, it'll just burn down the world. And on the contrary, trying to deal with them. Okay, we have, I guess, on some level, somebody's got to deal with them. We have an army in place. But that's not our problem. If that was how we're supposed to fix the world, the Rebbe would tell everyone to put on an army uniform and go to war. Which Rebbes have done in the past. We used to have kings and generals, and they would send the people to war. That wasn't like the Hora l'Rabim for every Jewish boy and girl. He told them to join the army of Hashem, which is to basically learn Chassidus and get like ready to go on shlichus and go out to help your fellow Jew in like an insane way and be lit up. So that's what he's talking about here. You have to go inside and find like this passion for Hashem inside of you, and it will more than take care of the enemies. It will make them be your friends. They'll get it. if we demand, and it's so simple. Why are they still fighting with us? Because we're not demanding Eretz Yisrael. We're not. If we would demand Eretz Yisrael, they would stop demanding it. If it's still conquerable in their minds, so they're going to conquer it. But so that's up to us. When we decide that it's our Eretz Yisrael, the Yiddish and the Neshama is not conquerable anymore, they will cease to try and conquer it. So it's exactly what the Rebbe is saying here. It's actually a military strategy, you know.
Wow.
Wait, I'm sorry. The military strategies that.
Conquering the land means conquering your thought, speech, and action for Hashem.
Okay.
That's what it is. And that will actually conquer the land. Alright, let's go on a little bit. So, Shlomo HaMelech, he had this Inyan of Derech Mamela. He had an Inyan of not going to war with him. It happened like automatically. But, he still, Nizbaru Rak Nitzotzos Elu, Shabem Eze Inyan Shel Or. He only was able to refine those sparks, which had a little bit of shaykhs to light. In other words, they were interested in being refined to some degree. Ki'im Shagam Nitzutza Shenechshachu Yuchlu B'Kedusha. Because even though what he's saying is that in the days of Shlomo, even the darkened sparks were able to. No. Did I skip a line or something? Come when he's better rak nitzus the ego shaya behem eze inyan shel or ki im shagam nitzos shnechshu yuchlu b'kedusha. He said, okay, so however, I guess he's saying, if you want the sparks that have become completely darkened, and you want them to be included in kedusha, to come back home into the family of holiness, recognize that they're from Elokus. V'yaser mizeh, and what's more, shagam nivra. If you want the actual created being, not just the divine spark which is enlivening the created being, but the goof of the created being himself, hanifal atzmo, not just the koach hapoal benifal, as we said, not just the power of God inside of the creation, but the nifal, the creation itself. If you want the godliness to go down to that level, and the definition of that level is that it doesn't have a feeling for Elokus, right? Because it's not meant to. Hashem made it in such a way that it's just like a dumb kli of Gashmias that Elokus can reside in. If you want even the Gashmias to come home and realize that it's also Elokus, lo rak hapoel shabo, not just the active ingredient of godliness in it, but it itself. You want this to be yeh b'tachlis is actus kamo sheyeh la'asid. You want that to be perfect oneness. That was only as it will be in the future. So that's an ultimate pada b'shalom, when you can actually get the kochos hatavim. Right, the natural world, and even the flesh of the natural world, to recognize that all there is God, and therefore all they are is also God. That's going to be the shleimus of the future. That's what it says, the many were with me. That even what's called the many, the multiplicity, which is those who are found in what we call in Chassidus, the Rishus HaRabim, the public domain, means the place where many rules instead of oneness rules. If you want the Rabbim to be with you, in other words, that element of creation which is like stuck in its mind that it is a plurality, it cannot see oneness. As it says, when Hashem says, Nase Adam b'tzalmenu kidmusenu, let's make man in our image, in our form, it says, Moshe piped up and he was like, you sure you want me to write this? Like, people are definitely going to get this one wrong, because Hashem is speaking in the plural. So what does Hashem say? Ksuv v'arot tzvitos yite. Write it, and whoever wants to make a mistake will make a mistake. Which means that he left room for a mistake. He left room for people who were just not interested or willing or able to see the oneness. He put it right in the Torah. And therefore, what the Rebbe, I believe, is trying to say here is that that's a real metzias of a thing. Hashem put in the Torah like that there's a way of looking at things wrong, and making a Rabbim, a plural out of God. And he put it right in the Torah because there are those that are going to be sort of dwelling and living in that level of mistake. That's called the Rishus HaRabim. But in order for even them, which Hashem made them like that, to be Hayu Imadi, they're going to be together with me, because this level of Atzmus, as we've been saying, is able to turn over even the lowest feeling of disconnect into oneness. They also will be joined in the ultimate state of oneness. V'zeu shekibarabim hayimadi hu nesinas tam al para b'shalom. And that's why, as it comes out, it says, my soul was redeemed in peace because the many were with me. And he's saying it's a reason for the first one, right? My soul was redeemed in peace because the many were with me. Meaning that the Padiyah b'Shalom, that when is it that you're redeemed in peace, and what does it mean peace? That it's all finished, there's no more opponent, is dafka al yedei zeh shegam b'chinas rabim. It's only through the fact that the many, not just the nitzotzos hakadusha, not just the holy sparks which are found in the many, kim gam elu shem b'chinas rab, but even those gufim who are holding like staunchly by a level of rabim, because they don't even have a godly spark in them. They're just the goof, which is meant to receive the godly spark and be enlivened by the godly spark. That's the Pashut Rabim. Only then will there be, when they're with Hashem, Hayu Imadi, is it possible to have a perfect peace? Is it possible to have the shleimus of the octaves? That's what it means. Pada b'shalom nafshi, that there will be total shleimus in the opponents disappearing, only when the Rabim will be with me. That's what it is. It's a nesinas tam. It's a giving of a reason why you are able to achieve a perfect peace. And like the pshat goes, that what does it really mean? The pasuk in pshat, that even David's enemies, which were Avshalom's warriors, they were secretly davening that David should win. That literally the opponent is with you, you know. And in our level, it means that even the most pushed off level of Klippa will be like secretly longing for divinity, which I think they are, by the way, you know? I think there's a huge masses of, I would imagine, there's huge masses of oppressed people who are living in this hell, that on one hand, for sure, their head are filled with lies and demonization of things, but on a certain bullshit level, they're suffering, and I'm sure they'd like to have a better world, you know? People talk about, even I'm saying people talk about how Hamas they're feared by the Palestinians themselves. They hate them basically because they're oppressing them in the most horrible way. You know. So I mean, I'm not saying that they're all just like little kittens in there, like being oppressed. I mean, they're being poisoned. Their minds are being poisoned. But there's a certain interest of being free. You know, even in like the deepest klippa, probably even in the, you know. All I'm saying is we should see it immediately. Anyway, hine Padiyah zu. He are the avoda shel esek haTorah. So how do you do it? It comes from the avoda of esek haTorah, gemus chasadim, and tefillah b'tzibur. So this is the part that Rabbi doesn't totally answer all the questions, but getting this level to come out of basically the yechidah shebet neshama, of getting the level of atzmos to sort of reveal itself. Again, you couldn't have done it on your own, but now that the Rebbeim did it, you can access it. How? Esek haTorah, gemus chasadim, and tefillah b'tzibur, davening with a minyan. What's the idea of osek b'Torah as opposed to just learning Torah? It means specifically Pnimiyas Torah. That's the Eitz Chaim, not the Nigla of Torah, which is called the that was mislavish be'Eitz Hatov, Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra. Right. So that's called osek b'Torah when you're getting to the real essence of the Torah. And why is it that brings the atzmus? Because learning Pnimiyas Torah is not in a way of war, right? Because you're not talking about the world at all. You're not dealing with your enemy. It's like the thing we said before, that you just go deep into yourself. When you learn Pnimiyas Torah, it's like you're going deep into Hashem, where He resides before He made the world. And so therefore, it has the ability to nullify the world because it's not recognizing the existence of the world. It doesn't even have, not only you're not fighting with it, it's not even like Moshe who just took the ark into the land of the enemy, even though he didn't fight with it. And that would be like, so to speak, learning about, Zroim and Nashim, and like learning about the world without actually dealing with them and like doing mitzvahs with them. Mitzvahs like getting your hands dirty with the world and fixing it is like mitzvahs. Learning about the world through the Torah would be like Moshe bringing the ark, and even that, Pnimiyas Torah doesn't even deal with the world. Therefore, you create a Padiyah b'Shalom. You totally nullify the existence of the enemy. You're not recognizing his existence. That's Torah. Then there's Gilus Chasadim. Gilus Chasadim draws down Pnimiyas HaKeser to the point that it goes all the way to Malchus of Malchus, as we said. In other words, the Kli. And why is that? Because we already said chesed. Chesed gives both to rich and poor. It can outdo even the level of ashirus. Again, he doesn't explain all these things at great length here. And also, tefillah b'tzibur is the union of tefillah of the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, right? In other words, everyone who davens, even a yachid, even an individual in Aseret Yemei Tshuva, is called davening with the tzibur. As it says, Dirshu Hashem b'himatzo, seek Hashem when He can be found. When is He found? In the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So He says, kan liyachid, kan letzibur. Meaning to say, He can always be found. But when you daven with a minyan, right? That's the only time He can be found. But in the 10 days of tshuva, even if you don't daven with a minyan, He's found because your individual prayer has the power of a tzibur inside of it. But tefillah b'tzibur is hamshachas pnimiyus hakeser. So what he's saying basically there is that when you daven with a minyan, you also arrive at this level of tefillah b'tzibur. That is tefillah b'tzibur, and that also taps into the pnimiyus of keser. Okay, so in other words, that's why those three things are mentioned in the Midrash upon the pasuk Para b'shalom nafshi ki b'rabim hayu imadi. It says anyone who learns Torah, does chesed, and davens a minyan, accomplishes the pediyah of me and my children from amongst the nations. So he's explaining why those things, that Midrash is associated with this pasuk. Because this pasuk is talking about completely undoing the enemy, and learning Chassidus, and giving tzedakah, chesed, dafka, and davening the minyan is the way to tap into the pnimiyus hakeser. Okay, so al pizeh tuvan hashayches to para b'shalom leguulas Rabbeinu Yazakin. We can also therefore understand what this pasuk has to do with the Alter Rebbe's release, which is the union of hafatzas hamayanos chutza. When he came out, he invented Chassidus, as it were. The union of hafatzas hamayanos chutza, who shegam b'chinas malchus of malchus, k'moshe b'chinas chutza yumshach l'sham hamayanos. So what's the chiddush? Hafatzas hamayanos chutza is a unique thing, because you're saying that the wellspring itself should go to the outside world. Usually the wellspring stays in its place and it sends a river. So the idea of the wellspring should go to the outside world, that you're bringing the source of the light even into the extended places. That is the claim of Chassidus, that it does, and that's what it means to bring the lowest parts of the world and make them realize that the wellspring of creation is right there as well. That the source of creation, the wellspring of God, is not just in some faraway place which hopefully one day will reach them, and maybe it never will reach them, but the wellspring is right there in their place, and therefore it has the ability to undo any klippa. Not only the living waters that are drawn from the mayan, but the mayanos atzmam, the actual mayan, is hamshachas pnimiyus hakeser. What's the mayan? Pnimiyus hakeser. That's called the mayan. L'bechinas malchus of malchus. And where does it go to? You don't just send an array of it. You put the mayan all the way down where the nivra is, where the nifal is, where the chutza is, and therefore there is no more enemy. That's why the reward is that it will bring Mashiach, as the Baal Shem Tov's famous letter said. Because as we're saying, what is it? Spreading the well springs. It's bringing Pnimiyus HaKesher, the highest level, the essence, to the lowest level. Malchus of Malchus, the goof. And this is like someone who does these three activities of learning, giving, and davening with the tzibur, that through this padani liul ulvani banai beina umos, that through doing this you will redeem. It's as it says, you will redeem the enemies. Meaning what? That's the union of geula. Why is it connected with the revelation of Chassidus connected with the coming of Malka Mashiach? Because as it says in the Midrash, if you do these three things which access the Pnimiyus HaKesser, you redeem me and my children from the Golas. It is the formula for Mashiach. Hashem will then remove the spirit of impurity from the world. We had to get through it. Yud-Tes is behind us. We got to move on to Chanukah. So we rushed it a little bit, but.
That's why I came early, because I thought this year was going to be on Hanukkah.
By the way, last night I got the answer from